A trade war. It sounds like something from a history book, doesn't it? But in 2025, it's not history. It's breaking news. The United States has kicked off a new wave of import tariffs, sparking a global economic fight that's changing the rules of the game. We're not talking about small tweaks here. The average US tariff rate briefly soared to levels we haven't seen in nearly a century. This isn't some far-off problem for economists. It's a shockwave that's already hitting your wallet, messing with global alliances, and creating a kind of economic uncertainty that could stick around for years. The United States recently imposed its highest tariffs since the 1930s, an era famous for the Smoot-Hawley Act, which many economists blame for making the Great Depression worse. With steep new taxes on goods from economic powerhouses like the European Union and China, the world is on edge. But what does this really mean for the global economy, for your job, and for the prices you pay every day? And how is this trade war set to permanently reshape our world? So what exactly happened? In early 2025, the U.S. government started imposing a series of aggressive new tariffs, claiming reasons from national security to unfair trade practices. It began with a baseline 10% tariff on almost all imports, but things escalated quickly. By April 2025, the average applied U.S. tariff rate had shot up to a peak of around 27%, the highest in over 90 years. After some tense negotiations and adjustments, that number dropped back to around 17.9% by September, but that's still a historically high level. The sharpest spikes were aimed at China, which started with tariffs related to various issues, snowballed into a full-on tariff conflict. At the peak, U.S. tariffs on many Chinese goods hit a staggering 125%. A temporary truce in mid-2025 brought that rate down to 30%, but this is still a massive jump from where things were just a year ago. And it's not just China. The European Union faced new tariffs that were capped at 15% on most goods as part of a negotiated deal. Allies like Canada and Mexico have also been pulled into the conflict, although goods that comply with the USMCA trade agreement are largely exempt, which softens the blow. Still, Canada has raised its general tariff rate on many non-compliant goods to 35%. Even emerging economies have been targeted, with countries like Brazil and India facing new duties. This policy is the biggest shift in American trade strategy in a generation. Unlike older, more targeted measures, the 2025 tariffs are broad, severe, and were rolled out with record speed. The stated goal is to protect and revive American industry, but the path chosen is a risky one. And the consequences of building this tariff wall are proving to be complicated and are being felt in every corner of the global economy. While tariffs are collected at the border, the cost doesn't stop there. It gets passed down the supply chain, and a lot of it lands on American consumers and businesses. The most immediate effect has been a sharp rise in prices on everyday items, from food to back-to-school supplies. One recent analysis from the Yale Budget Lab projects that the tariffs will cause an overall price level increase of 1.7%, which translates to an average income loss of about $2,400 per household in 2025 before they even change their shopping habits. After people switch to cheaper alternatives, the estimated annual loss is still around $700 per household, a significant hit for many families. For American businesses, the tariffs are a mixed bag. Sure, some domestic companies might get a boost from having less foreign competition, but many others are wrestling with huge cost increases for imported materials. This is hitting manufacturers hard, as well as businesses in mining and construction. A recent survey found that over half of manufacturing finance chiefs were scrambling to find new suppliers to get around the tariffs. For more than 30% of companies, trade policy is now their #1 concern. Small businesses are in a particularly tough spot. They don't have the deep pockets or flexibility of big corporations to find new partners or just eat the rising costs. Many will have to pass those costs on to customers, which just adds more fuel to inflation. The bigger economic picture is worrying too. The Yale Budget Lab projects that the tariffs will shave 0.5 percentage points off real GDP growth in both 2025 and 2026. Those same models predict a rise in unemployment and the loss of nearly 500,000 jobs by the end of 2025 alone. In the long run, the U.S. economy is expected to be persistently smaller than it would have been without these trade barriers. Of course, the US isn't making these moves in a vacuum. The world has responded, and the fallout is shaking up international relations. The first and most predictable response was retaliation. China quickly matched the US tariff hikes, imposing its own duties that peaked at 125% on American goods. Even after a temporary truce, Beijing's tariffs remain a huge hurdle for U.S. exporters, especially for agricultural products like soybeans, as China has shifted its purchases to countries like Brazil and Argentina. Other countries are doing the same. Canada announced retaliatory tariffs on tens of billions of dollars worth of American goods. The European Union, while reaching a settlement that capped most new U.S. tariffs at 15%, has reserved the right to hit back harder, especially if the U.S. goes after its auto industry. This tit-for-tat cycle is disrupting supply chains, raising costs for producers everywhere, and creating an unstable climate that makes businesses hesitant to invest. The diplomatic fallout has just been as severe, straining relationships with some of America's closest allies. Decades of cooperation built on stable trade rules are suddenly in doubt. This has forced countries and entire trade blocs to rethink their economic friends. For example, while China's exports to the U.S. have dropped, its trade with the EU and Southeast Asian nations has grown. This global reshuffling might be one of the most lasting consequences of the trade war. Businesses everywhere are being forced to make expensive and difficult changes to their supply chains, looking for new partners in countries that aren't caught in the tariff crossfire. This is creating new economic winners and losers, and could lead to the rise of separate trading blocs centered around the US, China, and the EU. The era of easy globalization is facing a new reality of strategic competition and fragmented economies. This uncertainty is keeping global markets on edge as everyone waits to see what comes next. Understanding these complex shifts is more important than ever. If you want to stay informed with in-depth analysis on how global economic changes are affecting you, make sure to subscribe to our channel and hit the notification bell. The 2025 U.S. import tariffs are much more than a simple policy tweak. They're a major economic event, triggering the highest average tariff rates in nearly a century and setting off a chain reaction around the world. Here at home, American consumers are facing higher prices on everything from clothes to food, costing the average household hundreds, if not thousands of dollars a year. Businesses are scrambling to rebuild supply chains that took decades to create, and the country's economic growth is projected to slow. Globally, the tariffs have sparked tit-for-tat retaliation, damaged key diplomatic relations, and sped up a major realignment of international trade. We may be witnessing a shift away from a deeply integrated global economy toward one defined by competing economic zones. The state goal was to protect and revive American industry, but the path chosen is a risky one, and the world is now trying to find its footing in a new landscape of economic nationalism, where the free flow of goods can no longer be taken for granted. The big question is no longer just about who wins or loses a trade war, but what the new world of international relations will look like once the dust finally settles.